Hello and welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl as we come to the final part looking at the characters of the Dwarven Mountain Halls. So let's see, what's up next is the Demon Slayer. So a good weapon skill, good toughness, good initiative for a dwarf, attacks and leadership. So you can see this guy could be a bit of a beast. Low movement and wounds, however. He is heavy infantry and a character on a 25mm base. He only comes with a hand weapon. He has no armor, right? Options is a great weapon and an additional hand weapon and no armor. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind. This guy's going to deal it out, but he's not going to take it back. 75 points of weapon and 25 points on talismanic runes, so plenty there. So, in terms of rules, he has Gromrill weapons, which is hand weapons AP -1. So, with that improved initiative, which is nice, he's going to be attacking, he's got more chance of attacking first. So taking that additional hand weapon, so increasing his attacks, which are going to be at AP -1 because of Gromrill weapons, actually is quite nice. Magic resistance of 2, so that's pretty good as well. And he has Death Blow, so we looked at this as part of the faction rules. So if he does die, I'm not a big fan of these rules, as I said before, but if he does die, at least it's going to be an attack back. But losing a Demon Slayer, that's quite a lot of points. So I'm not putting all my hope into the Death Blow rule. Immune to psychology, so he's going to automatically pass fear, panic and terror test, but he cannot flee as a charge reaction, which I hope I wouldn't be wanting to do with a dwarf unit. He does have Killing Blow. This is really nice. So when rolling a 6 to wound against troop type infantry or cavalry, they are not permitted an armor or regeneration save, though they can use a ward save as normal. And if the wound is unsaved, the enemy model instantly loses all remaining wounds. So pretty nasty against all of that multi-wound infantry and cavalry. So quite nice, especially again, think about that if you're taking the additional hand weapon, it's going to give you an additional attack, which is going to give you more chance to roll 6s during that 6 to wound, because more hits you get, the more dice you're rolling to wound, the more dice you're rolling to wound, the more chance you're going to get 6s, and that Killing Blow is going to be really nice. So he does have a loner, so he cannot be the army general, and he cannot join a unit that also does not have this special rule. So he is only going to be able to join other units of Slayers. Slayer of Demons, which is specific to this character, always wounds on a 4+, which is nice regardless of enemy toughness. Enemy models with the Warp Spawn special rule, or the troop type Behemoth, he gains the multiple wound D3. So that does make him at least have a decent chance. So, if you've got an enemy character out there riding a monster or an enemy monster running around, this guy could be pretty nice at dealing some really serious damage to that model and would be pretty scary to face, assuming he gets to attack first. Now, he is unbreakable, so when losing a round of combat, he doesn't take a break test. Instead, he automatically gives ground, and he cannot join a unit that does not have this rule. Well, he can only really join Slayers because of the loner anyway, so that won't be a problem. He does get Vanguard, so after deployment, he may make a normal move, but he cannot march. So that's him obviously moving quickly towards the enemy. The downside with that is, of course, if you're moving him up, Slayers are going to be seen as a high damage unit, but have no armor, so going to be very vulnerable to missile fire and war machines and so on. So anything that you can do in the shooting phase, so that's if you did take that master standard rune of Grungni, can you at least give them a 6+ ward save in shooting or something like that. So something to consider is that he is incredibly vulnerable without that armor. Overall, I'm not a big Slayer fan. Lots of people out there like entire Slayer armies. When I play Total Warhammer, I just almost never play Ungrim, never recruit Slayers. I'm just not a huge fan of the whole aesthetic of Slayers. I like my dwarfs heavily armoured, lots of range weaponry and all that type of stuff. And that's regardless of their performance. That's just an aesthetic thing. That's a personal thing. But there's no doubt this guy, he can dish out the damage. right? He's a very, very killy character. But he can only join units of Slayers. He's the most expensive character in the army list. I'm ignoring the Anvil of Doom there. I'm talking about a single model on foot. Anvil of Doom kind of special on that. But he's he's more expensive than a king or a rune lord. And overall, I actually prefer the utility, however, of the king and the rune lord because of the buffs they give, how durable they are. Putting a lot of points into the model. 120 plus points. Plus all the runes and things you're going to give them. So I like to have a bit of durability in there as well. He's going to get the durability from being in a unit, but how long is that Slayer unit going to last under missile fire? He's definitely a hammer unit. And the Demon Slayer, he does get unbreakable, immune to psychology. Both the character and the unit don't do well being attacked back. So, if you're going up against armies that have strikes first, have high initiative, have lots of missile fire, war machines, stuff like that, magic missiles and things, it's going to be a problem. And combine that with the low dwarf movement, it can make it tricky. You're going to have to be really smart how you use both the Demon Slayer and the unit that he's with to ensure that they can actually survive and make it into combat. And that's also, the enemy can put things like skirmishers, roadblocks and that sort of thing in front of them, and they'll absolutely decimate little skirmishing units of, let's say, dire wolves and stuff like that, but it will slow them down and make them more vulnerable, right? So just something to consider with them, high damage but massively vulnerable. It's going to be used best when flanking a unit that's already engaged, so he's not worried about being attacked first, or very narrow fronted units that are unlikely to get many attacks back. So if you're thinking a unit that's got a really wide frontage, you've got to kill enough models on that frontage so they don't get to attack back with their assisting attacks and so on. But he does have higher than average dwarf initiative. Initiative of 5 is actually really going to help him. So most of the time, the actual Demon Slayer is often going to be in a situation where he's going to be able to attack first, which is nice, depending against who you're facing, of course. But that initiative of 5 is huge, really, for the dwarfs. So nice, especially on the charge where you get that bonus. He's excellent at dealing with multi-wound infantry, as we said, because of Killing Blow. And risky in duels. There's a lot of killy characters are going to have better initiative or maybe strikes first weapons. So that's something to consider about if you do get caught out in a challenge. But there's going to be a lot of characters out there that are going to be wary about going up against a character that has Killing Blow in a challenge, particularly one that's going to deal quite a few attacks. So weapon runes I would consider. Master Rune of Swiftness, guarantee he gets to strike first because you really want him to do that. So that's going to be really important. Rune of Speed, again, if you just want to push that initiative up a little bit higher, it's cheaper than the Rune of Swiftness, so it depends if you're struggling with points or not. But that bonus initiative could really help. Talismanic runes, Rune of Warding would be an interesting one. As I said, I like to keep my characters cheap, so I do go for the cheaper runes rather than the really expensive ones. This one, pretty cheap, gives you a 2+ ward save against a single wound. That could mean the difference, though, between keeping this character alive and him dying. And say a really expensive character who needs to get his attacks off, if you do get caught in a duel, that could save him, keep him on the board. He gets to attack back and then he'll kill that character in the duel. In the same as if he's able to really put the hurt on an enemy unit and survive, that combat result could be swung in his favour. So Rune of Warding, don't underestimate. I know it's only a single wound, but that could be a game changer, though situational as to when it's actually going to be a game changer. So that is the Demon Slayer. Next up is the Dragon Slayer. So this is the other option. I really do like the model, though. This is actually a really nice looking miniature for me. I think it looks great. But versus a Demon Slayer, you lose a weapon skill, a wound, initiative, and an attack, but he does cost 50% of the points. Heavy infantry, character, 25mm base, all the same as the Demon Slayer, though he only gets 25 points of weapon runes this time. So again, pretty much all the same things. The Gromwell weapons, the hatred, magic resistance of 2, all very nice. Death blow, killing blow, Loner, so he can only join Slayer units. He's Unbreakable again, and Vanguard. Now he gets Slayer of Dragons, which is the specific one to the Dragon Slayer. So he always wounds on a 4+, regardless of enemy toughness. Enemy models with the troop type Behemoth, he gains the multiple wounds D3. So he still has that ability to deal multiple wound damage to those big monsters, which is really nice. On top of the killing blow on infantry and cavalry. So, they're pretty, overall, both the Demon Slayer and Dragon Slayer are pretty flexible in terms of the units they target. It's just being able to survive long enough. So, as we've said, not a fan of the Slayers, but he's a killy character, so it's exactly the same as Demon Slayer. If taking a unit of Slayers, and unless doing a full Slayer-themed army, I would prefer the cheaper Dragon Slayer. He doesn't really lose too much over the Demon Slayer, right? The Demon Slayer rule, he's got all the same rules, but the Demon Slayer part means he affects warp spawned. And how many times, if you're building a catch-all army list, how many times is that really going to come into play? He's half the points cost. You lose a few of the stats, but actually, if you're just taking a single unit of Slayers, I think the Dragon Slayer is probably a much better choice. Definitely a hammer unit. Dragon Slayer gets Unbreakable, all the same things, but again, just like the Demon Slayer and the unit, low movement, lack of armor, vulnerable to missile fire. Weapon runes, again, just like the Demon Slayer, you can do exactly the same things. You can give him that Master Rune of Swiftness or the Rune of Speed. So, you can buff that initiative. He does lose that one initiative against the Demon Slayer, so actually probably the Master Rune of Swiftness, given he's a significantly cheaper character, would probably be a good thing to ensure that he does strike first, get those attacks off, the killing blows off. So there you go, that's the Dragon Slayer. Say, not a huge fan of Slayers personally. You won't see me taking them in any of my army lists, but overall, there's no doubt they can certainly put the damage out when you need them to. Okay, and the last character now in the Dwarven Mountain Holds army list. So this is the Engineer, and I'm quite a fan of the Engineer because I like my gunline armies. So he's got good ballistic skill and leadership. So ballistic skill, not a surprise for the Engineer. Low movement, he's got low wounds, low initiative, and low attack. So not the best stat line, but that's not really his role. This is more of a support character. Heavy infantry character, base size 25. So he comes with hand weapon and heavy armor, and he can take pistol, brace of pistols, great weapon, or a handgun. Personally, I like the handgun because this guy, he needs to be, he's going to be fighting at range. You take 50 points of weapon, armor, and talismanic runes. Okay. Engineer special rules. Right. Gromwell armor. So, so keeps him alive a little bit. Hatred, magic resistance, resolute. Right. Now, this is into the specific things. Artillery master. Once per turn during the shooting phase and within command range, a unit of Quarrelers, Thunderers, or War Machine may re-roll hit rolls of 1 or a single artillery dice. This can be really nice. So you think, organ gun, rolling 2 artillery dice, more chance of rolling a misfire, that ability to re-roll that misfire. Really nice. Maybe you're not taking war machines, or maybe you're taking something like the bolt thrower or something where you don't really need the Engineer. Well, that buff to a unit of Quarrelers, where you're getting them to re-roll the hit rolls of 1, that's just going to improve that missile fire a little bit. The same with the Thunderers. So Artillery Master, a really, really nice buff, and interesting that it affects the Quarrelers and Thunderers as well as a War Machine. I think that's really interesting. Dwarf crafted, so if he's going to get charged, he can stand and shoot, which he's got the weapons to do so, and he doesn't get the -1 to hit. So maybe you'll chip a model off or something that charges you. Right, entrenchment, another specific one. So during deployment, a single war machine may be entrenched, giving it partial cover and defending a low linear obstacle but it will lose this if it moves. So that partial cover is just going to be nice just to protect it from a bit of missile fire. It just helps it make a little bit more survivable. Same as if it gets charged. If you're getting charged by some lowly skirmishing unit that's got round the back, which is going to be normally the case, at least you've got a chance of surviving, and the Engineer can really help that. The other one is Stand Back Chief, which means he cannot be targeted by enemy shooting or spells while within 3 inches of a war machine. All right, and a lot of the time you're going to want this guy near a war machine. Yes, he can buff Quarrelers and Thunderers, but most of the time you're going to want him babysitting a war machine, allowing them to re-roll that single artillery dice. So that's going to keep him alive in their occasions where then you could potentially run him forwards, get him in command range of a unit of Quarrelers, and buff their hit rolls if needed. So very, very useful, very nice special rules. I really like the Engineer. So, as I said, I trend towards gun lines. I do like gun lines, you know, supporting heavily armoured units, so hammerers, iron breakers, longbeards, that sort of thing. You know, I nearly always take at least 2 artillery units, if not more. So I can always see a place for Engineer in my list, particularly with often my core. You know, I sort of gravitate towards Quarrelers as core troops as well, so that he can buff those. He's the cheapest character in the list. He's got valuable buffs, both War Machines, Thunderers, and Quarrelers. And then I keep my Engineer normally next to a War Machine, though it does depend on the War Machine. But because I'm keeping him back at range, you know, I consider taking the handgun. So if anyone does come within that range of the handgun, 24 inches, you can get a shot off or 2, maybe chip a wound. That can help. You never know in a pinch. Again, I keep him cheap. I'd rather take him as cheap as possible and then get a second Engineer than really buff him up on in terms of runes. So weapon runes, generally I would consider none. Armor runes, you know, maybe Rune of Shielding to give him a 6+ ward save, but does he really again need that? If he's within that war machine, he can't be targeted anyway. So, you know, something to consider maybe if you're using him to buff Quarrelers and you're pushing him further forwards maybe. But if you're keeping him with a war machine, I wouldn't bother. And the same with Talismanic runes, I wouldn't bother with that either. So Engineers, really like them. If you're taking lots of war machines, Quarrelers and so on, take 2. The buffs can be really nice. So yeah, a good character overall, and pretty much I'm going to have at least 1 Engineer in almost every army list I'll be using with the Dwarves, given how I personally play them. As I said, these are my personal opinions in terms of the comments section. So that's based on how I build my list, the units I take, and then how I deploy, move, and fight with that army. So I hope this was a useful video. We've come to the end of the Dwarf characters. Next up will be Core. If this video was useful and you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Let me know why in the comments down below. And as always, if you want to see more content, hit that subscribe button. Totally free for you to do. It's a big deal for me, so thank you for that in advance. And thank you to all of those who have already subscribed. You've been watching The Ghost Style. Tune back in for the next part of the faction focus for the Dwarves, which is looking at the core units.